I stood at the doorway, frozen, as my world shattered. 2 days before our wedding, I caught my fiancé Dominic in bed with my cousin Valentina. Worse, they laughed about tricking me. "She thinks you love her," Valentina whispered. "What a fool." Dominic sneered, calling our 3-year relationship a strategic mistake, since my parents cut me from their will. They planned to use me for money I didn't even have. That night, I made a choice. I wouldn't just cry. I staged my death and disappeared. 5 years later, I returned as someone new. They built a life on my pain, flaunting their marriage at parties while hiding dark secrets. Now it's my turn. They think I'm dead, but I'm reborn. And I'm back to ruin the lives they built on lies. I was born a Blackwood, a name that meant something in this city. Our family estate sprawled across the hills overlooking the lake, generations of old money and influence carved into every marble column. But I was always the disappointment, Esmeralda, the daughter who preferred art galleries to board meetings. "Another exhibition opening, Esmeralda?" My mother would sigh. "Pearl necklace," glinting disapprovingly. "Your brother is closing a 7-figure deal today." Thaddeus, golden child and heir apparent, never failed to remind me of my place in the family hierarchy. "Not everyone can have business acumen, sister," he'd say with that practiced smile. "Someone has to appreciate the finer things we afford." I learned about the revised will by accident. Father left the papers in his study, and there it was in cold legal terms. Thaddeus would inherit the company, the estate, the majority of assets. My portion amounted to little more than a token allowance. When confronted, my parents didn't even pretend to be apologetic. "You've shown no interest in preserving the Blackwood legacy," Father said, not looking up from his desk. "We're being practical, not punitive." Through all this familial coldness, Dominic was my refuge. He'd appeared at a charity auction 3 years ago, handsome in his tailored suit, eyes finding mine across the room. Not from money himself. He worked as a financial advisor to the elite, understanding both worlds I inhabited. "They don't see your worth," he would whisper, holding me when family dinners ended in tears. "But I do." When he proposed, kneeling, beside the lake where generations of Blackwoods had married, I felt vindicated. Someone chose me, valued me, wanted me, not for the name but for myself. The diamond caught the sunset, and I said yes through happy tears. Wedding planning became my escape from family tension. My cousin Valentina stepped in as maid of honor when my mother showed minimal interest. Valentina and I had never been particularly close growing up. She was always more aligned with my family's values, impeccably dressed and socially calculating. But in those months, she seemed to transform into my closest ally. "Don't worry about your mother," she'd say, flipping through venue options. "This is your day, not hers." She helped select flowers, tasted cakes, joined fittings. When I cried over my mother's criticism of my dress choice, Valentina was there with tissues and reassurance. I mistook her efficiency for affection, her attention for loyalty. Looking back, I should have recognized the calculation behind her eyes. 2 days before the wedding, my final dress fitting ended early. The boutique owner needed to close for a family emergency, promising the completed alterations would be ready by morning. I returned to the lakeside cottage Dominic and I had purchased as our starter home, planning to surprise him with lunch. The front door was unlocked. I called out, but no answer came. Only as I climbed the stairs did I hear voices from our bedroom, soft laughter, murmurs. I slowed my steps, a cold feeling spreading through my chest. The bedroom door wasn't fully closed. Through the crack, I saw them, Dominic and Valentina entwined in our bed. The sheets I had selected for our marriage twisted around them. I didn't gasp or cry out. Some instinct kept me frozen, silent in the hallway as their post-coital conversation unfolded. "She still has no idea," Valentina said, running her fingers through his hair. "Poor, naive Esmeralda. Dominic chuckled. She thinks, this is a love match. Not that I haven't grown fond of her, but certain realities must be faced. Like the reality that her parents practically disinherited her? Valentina's voice was sharp with amusement. I still can't believe you didn't know. Some financial advisor. You are. It was a miscalculation, he admitted. When we met, all signs pointed to her receiving at least the lake properties. I never anticipated they'd leave her with so little. So what now? The wedding is in 2 days. He sighed, and I watched him kiss her shoulder, the same way he'd kissed mine countless times. The Blackwood name still has value. There are worse things than being connected to the family, even through the black sheep. And she's easy to manage, starved for affection, eager to please. And us? Valentina prompted. We continue as planned. A year or 2 of marriage, then an amicable separation. By then, I'll have established enough connections through the family to strike out independently. You and I can be more public once the dust settles. They continued talking, making plans over the corpse of my future, but I'd heard enough. I backed away silently, descended the stairs, and left the house without disturbing them. Outside, the lake sparkled innocently in the afternoon sun, unchanged while my world collapsed. I drove aimlessly for hours, mind blank with shock. By evening, grief gave way to rage. I wasn't just betrayed, but ridiculed, manipulated, seen as nothing more than access to a family that didn't even want me. The perfect tragic narrative. Unloved daughter, cheated fiancé, laughingstock. I could already imagine the pitying looks, the gossip at the canceled wedding, how this story would define me forever in our social circles. As night fell, I found myself at my grandmother's abandoned mansion. She'd been the only family member who ever truly saw me, encouraging my love of art before her death 3 years ago. The estate remained in legal limbo, too full of memories, for my parents to sell, but too eccentric for them to maintain. I still had the key. Inside, dust sheets covered antique furniture, but the place smelled of her, old books and French perfume. I collapsed in her study, sobbing properly for the first time since witnessing the betrayal. Through tears, I noticed her portrait watching me, the rebellious Blackwood matriarch who had scandalized her generation by touring Europe alone in the 1960s, collecting art and lovers with equal enthusiasm. When betrayal comes, look to the hidden places, she had told me in her final days. Words I'd dismissed as morphine-induced rambling. Now, staring at her painted eyes, I remembered another conversation about her most valuable paintings being safer out of sight. Behind her portrait was a wall safe I'd never known existed. The combination, my birthday, revealed not jewels but documentation for an impressive art collection she'd kept secret from the family, along with account details for a Swiss bank. She had left me a fortune that no one, not even my parents, knew existed. That night, as I sorted through her legacy, a plan formed. Esmeralda Blackwood, disappointing daughter, discarded fiancé, would die. And someone new would rise from those ashes. I spent that night in my grandmother's dusty mansion, moving between grief and calculated fury. By dawn, my plan had crystallized with startling clarity. The inheritance my grandmother had hidden from the family was my ticket to a new life, but first I needed to disappear completely. Not just leave, but cease to exist in a way that would close all questions, all pursuits. The lake would be my accomplice. I drove to our cottage before sunrise, knowing Dominic would be gone for his traditional pre-wedding breakfast with his groomsmen. Inside, I collected only what couldn't be replaced: my grandmother's locket, my passport, and the documentation of my secret inheritance. From my closet, I selected a white sundress I'd worn often, one Dominic complimented frequently. At the private dock behind our cottage, I untied my small rowboat. The morning mist still clung to the water's surface, providing perfect cover. I rowed to the center of the lake, my mind oddly calm despite what I was about to do. The waters were cold when I dipped my hand in, reminding me of childhood swims with my mother before ambition hardened her heart against her disappointing daughter. From my bag, I withdrew a small knife. The pain was sharp but brief as I cut my palm, letting blood drip onto my white dress, my scarf, the side of the boat. I smeared more across the wooden plank seat, creating a scene of struggle. Next came my engagement ring, dropped deliberately to the boat's floor. I tore the hem of my dress, leaving fabric snagged on a rough edge of wood. With methodical movements, I capsized the boat, ensuring it would be found floating upside down. The current would carry it toward the center of the lake, where the depth exceeded 60 feet. I had already slipped into the water on the far side, my waterproof bag containing my essential documents secure against my chest. I swam underwater as far as my lungs allowed, emerging only when hidden by the mist and distance. The shoreline far from our property was less developed, bordered by woods where my grandmother had taught me to forage for mushrooms as a child. I knew these trees, these hidden paths that would lead me unseen to the road where I'd parked my second car, an old model registered in my grandmother's name that the family had forgotten existed. By noon, search boats would comb the lake. By evening, divers would search the murky depths. They would find the blood, the torn fabric, the discarded ring, but no body. The lake had claimed victims before, its currents sometimes carrying remains miles downstream, sometimes keeping them forever. I drove straight to the private airfield where my grandmother's art dealer still maintained a small plane. Henri had been more than a business associate to her, and the substantial payment I offered ensured his discretion. With a passport bearing my middle name and my mother's maiden name, legally mine but rarely used, I boarded the small aircraft bound for Lisbon. As we took off, I watched my city grow small beneath us. Somewhere down there, Dominic would soon be informed of the empty rowboat, the signs of violence. Valentina would perform shock and grief while secretly calculating how this changed their plans. My parents would face the public scrutiny of a daughter lost 2 days before her wedding. And Thaddeus, my perfect brother, would manage the family response with appropriate gravity. None of them would know I watched the news reports from a small Lisbon apartment that evening. The local anchor's solemn face filled the screen as she reported the presumed drowning of Esmeralda Blackwood, daughter of prominent businessman Richard Blackwood, just days before her wedding. Footage showed search teams dragging the lake. My mother's rigid face as she clutched my father's arm. Dominic's performance of devastation as he begged for privacy during this unimaginable tragedy. The following days brought the expected narrative: pre-wedding anxiety, possible suicide. Some outlets mentioned my history of emotional fragility, a convenient fiction my family had cultivated to explain my artistic temperament. Valentina appeared appropriately distraught in her brief statement, praising me as sensitive and loving, perhaps too much for this harsh world. No body was recovered. After 2 weeks, the search was officially suspended. A memorial service was held at the lakeside, white roses cast into the water that had supposedly claimed me. I watched the live stream from my apartment, studying the faces of those who believed they knew me. Dominic spoke of lost love and unfulfilled dreams. My father emphasized my artistic spirit. Friends shared anecdotes sanitized of all conflict, portraying a gentle soul too delicate for this world. The narrative was complete. Tragic Esmeralda, overcome by emotion, taken by the waters that had witnessed her engagement. Case closed, chapter ended. Only I knew the truth. Esmeralda Blackwood hadn't drowned in despair, but had been strategically sacrificed so something stronger could emerge. In Lisbon, I began my metamorphosis. First came the practical matters, establishing my new identity as Zara Montero through carefully crafted documentation, setting up accounts using my grandmother's inheritance, and connecting with her old art world contacts, who asked few questions when presented with her collection's authentication papers. The physical transformation followed. I cut my waist-length dark hair to a sophisticated bob, dyed it a subtle shade of auburn. Slight cosmetic alterations, nothing dramatic, just enough to soften my distinctive blackwood jawline and adjust the arch of my eyebrows. I adopted a carefully practiced accent, neither American nor fully European, but cosmopolitan and untraceable. Each morning, I practiced my new voice, trained my posture to eliminate the slight stoop I'd developed from years of trying to minimize my height around shorter family members. I studied the art market meticulously, building the knowledge base that would make Zara Montero a believable presence in exclusive auction houses. My grandmother's collection provided the perfect entry point. I sold pieces strategically, establishing relationships with key dealers while building a reputation for discerning taste and shrewd negotiation. Within 2 years, Zara Montero was known in select circles as a rising dealer with mysterious connections and impeccable credentials. From my new life, I monitored those I'd left behind. Social media and society pages provided regular updates. Dominic and Valentina married 6 months after my death, a respectful interval observed for appearances. My family attended, proper mourning set aside for the social obligation. The couple quickly rose in prominence, Valentina's family connections and Dominic's financial acumen creating the perfect society partnership. My brother Thaddeus expanded the Blackwood holdings, his profile growing as he acquired smaller companies with alarming speed. What the business pages celebrated as aggressive expansion, I recognized as desperation. The Blackwood fortune had never been as substantial as the family pretended, and Thaddeus was leveraging everything to maintain appearances. For 5 years, I built Zara's life while studying those who had destroyed Esmeralda's. I learned their routines, their weaknesses, their vulnerabilities. I tracked their finances through industry contacts, noting the increasing frequency with which Dominic and Thaddeus appeared together at business functions. Something was brewing between my ex-fiancé and my brother, some partnership that occupied gossip columns with vague promises of revolutionary investment opportunities. When I finally determined the time was right to return, I didn't just go home, I arrived. Zara Montero made her American debut at the Crystal Gallery auction, specifically selected because Valentina chaired the event's committee. I wore burgundy silk that evening, my transformed self moving confidently through the crowd of people who had once known Esmeralda, but saw no trace of her in the sophisticated art dealer before them. Valentina herself introduced us, playing the gracious hostess to an international visitor of note. "Your reputation precedes you, Ms. Montero," she said, air-kissing my cheeks. "Your acquisition of the Vermeer study was quite the coup." I smiled, meeting the eyes of the woman who had betrayed me, who had mourned me publicly while privately celebrating my removal. "I find that patience yields the most satisfying results," I replied. "Some opportunities are worth waiting years for." She had no idea how true those words were, or that her casual invitation to join her select art acquisition committee would be the key that unlocked my revenge. As I accepted with practiced grace, I silently marveled at how eagerly she welcomed the architect of her destruction into her home. Lisbon transformed me in ways beyond the physical. Each morning I woke in my sunlit apartment overlooking the Tagus River and practiced becoming Zara. I stood before the mirror, shoulders back, chin slightly elevated, rehearsing expressions until they became natural. I banished Esmeralda's nervous habit of tucking hair behind her ear, her tendency to look down when speaking. Zara looked people directly in the eyes, occupied space unapologetically, moved with deliberate grace. My voice coach, a retired opera singer who asked no questions about my past, helped me develop a cultured accent that suggested international schooling rather than my actual New England upbringing. We stripped away the soft consonants of my natural speech, replacing them with something more cosmopolitan and untraceable. Imagine each word is a gem you are presenting, she instructed. Not carelessly tossed, but deliberately placed. I sold my grandmother's collection piece by piece, establishing relationships with galleries across Europe. Each sale built not just my finances, but my credibility. I cultivated an air of mystery about my background, letting people assume I came from old European money fallen on harder times. The art world loves a good story, and the enigmatic Zara Montero became part of the narrative that sold paintings. 5 years passed this way, my new self hardening like a pearl around the grain of betrayal at my core. I built a fortune that surpassed even my family's, investments carefully chosen based on the financial acumen I had absorbed from countless dinners listening to my father and brother. The millions I amassed were not just wealth, but armor, proof, against ever being vulnerable again. From my European vantage point, I tracked their lives through society pages and financial news. Dominic and Valentina married at the St. Regis, honeymooned in Bali, purchased the Henderson estate on Lakeview Drive. They appeared in charity gala photos, her hand often resting protectively on his arm, his smile never quite reaching his eyes. My brother expanded Blackwood Industries rapidly, acquiring smaller companies with alarming speed, his name increasingly mentioned alongside Dominic's in business columns. I hired discreet investigators to dig deeper than public records could reveal. Their reports confirmed my suspicions. Beneath the glossy veneer, trouble brewed. Blackwood Industries had overextended, leveraging assets for acquisitions that weren't performing. Dominic had established several shell companies that seemed designed more to obscure finances than generate profit. The pieces suggested a complex shell game rather than legitimate business. When I finally decided to return, I planned my entrance carefully. The Crystal Gallery auction was an annual event, the highlight of the fall social season. Valentina had chaired the committee for 3 years running, making it her signature event. I arranged with the gallery owner, an old contact from my grandmother's days, to be introduced as a special European dealer with access to private collections rarely seen in American markets. I chose my appearance with surgical precision. I, too. Burgundy silk dress was conservative enough for old money approval, but cut to suggest European sophistication. My jewelry was understated but exquisite. A single diamond pendant that had belonged to my grandmother, recut and reset to be unrecognizable. My hair, now a rich auburn rather than Esmeralda's dark brown, was styled in a sleek bob that emphasized my altered jawline. Walking into that gallery felt like stepping onto a stage. I recognized every face, though none recognized mine. Old family friends, business associates, the entire social circle that had attended my memorial service now appraised the mysterious European art dealer with curious eyes. My mother stood near a Monet, champagne in hand, looking older than I remembered. My father engaged in serious conversation with a state senator, the same forced smile he reserved for political connections. And there was Valentina, resplendent, in blue satin, diamonds at her throat, playing the perfect hostess. She had grown more polished in the intervening years, her natural beauty enhanced by wealth and security. Beside her stood Dominic, handsome as ever in his tuxedo, hand placed possessively at the small of her back as they greeted guests. The gallery owner, Simon, guided me directly to them as planned. "Valentina, darling, may I introduce Zara Montero, the dealer I mentioned from Lisbon? She has access to the Visconti collection we discussed." Valentina's eyes assessed me with practiced social skill, taking in the quality of my dress, my jewelry, my posture. I met her gaze steadily, feeling a surreal disconnect as the woman who had destroyed my life air-kissed my cheeks in greeting. "Your reputation precedes you, Ms. Montero," she said. "Your acquisition of the Vermeer study was quite the coup." I permitted myself a small smile. I find that patience yields the most satisfying results. Some opportunities are worth waiting years for. Dominic extended his hand, and I felt a cold thrill as our fingers touched for the first time since I discovered his betrayal. Dominic Ashcroft. My wife has spoken of little else but the possibility of accessing the Visconti pieces. The collection is quite exclusive, I replied, voice cool and professional. I rarely offer viewings to new clients, but Simon speaks highly of your wife's discernment. Over champagne, I observed them together, noting the subtle tells invisible to anyone who hadn't spent years studying human behavior as I had. The slight stiffness in Valentina's smile when Dominic spoke over her, the way his eyes tracked attractive women while maintaining conversation. They performed the role of devoted couple convincingly enough for their audience, but I recognized the familiar fault lines of a marriage built on mutual advantage rather than love. By evening's end, I had secured an invitation to Valentina's private art consultation at their home the following week. As my driver took me back to my hotel, I reviewed the evening with clinical detachment. No one had shown the slightest recognition, not even my own mother when we were briefly introduced. Esmeralda had been thoroughly erased, replaced by a woman no one would connect to the drowned bride of 5 years past. The Ashcroft estate sat on the same lake that had witnessed my staged drowning, though on the opposite, more exclusive shore. I arrived for my consultation precisely on time, portfolio of potential acquisitions in hand. The butler showed me to the solarium where Valentina awaited, sunlight streaming through glass walls that overlooked manicured gardens sloping down to the water. "Zara, thank you for coming," Valentina greeted me, gesturing to the sitting area where tea had been arranged. "I hope you'll forgive the informal setting. I prefer to consider art in natural light." I murmured appropriate pleasantries while taking in the room. Photos adorned side tables, their wedding, vacation snapshots, a formal portrait with my parents and brother. The house was a shrine to the life they had built on the foundation of my destruction. As we reviewed the portfolio, I guided the conversation with practiced ease. Valentina revealed herself to be genuinely knowledgeable about art, her interest, not merely social posturing. She spoke with passion about certain pieces, displaying a sensitivity I had not expected. "My cousin had artistic sensibilities," she said unexpectedly as we discussed a particular landscape. "She drowned years ago, just before her wedding. I sometimes wonder what she would have accomplished if she had lived." I maintained perfect composure, though my heart raced. How tragic. Was she an artist herself? No, but she understood beauty. It was something we shared, despite our differences. For a moment, genuine regret crossed her features. I miss her more than people might expect. The complexity of human nature never fails to surprise. This woman who had betrayed me, who had taken my fiancé and mourned me publicly while building, her life on the ruins of mine, could still experience what appeared to be genuine grief for the cousin she had wronged. I filed this observation away, a potentially useful complication. Our weekly consultations became regular appointments. I gradually expanded our conversations beyond art, establishing myself as a sympathetic ear. Valentina, isolated by wealth and social position, seemed hungry for authentic connection. Within 2 months, she was confiding details about her marriage, her strained relationship with my parents, her sense of disconnection from her social circle. "Dominic is rarely home these days," she admitted during our third meeting. "Business with Thaddeus keeps him working late. At least that's what he says." I made appropriately sympathetic sounds while noting the doubt in her voice. "Men can become consumed by ambition," I offered, "sometimes at the expense of what truly matters." "You have no idea," she sighed. "When we married, I thought I understood. The bargain, social position, financial security. I never expected conventional romance. But lately, I wonder if I miscalculated entirely." Each revelation was a thread in the tapestry of their vulnerabilities I was weaving. After our sessions, I would return to my hotel to update my extensive notes on the Ashcroft marriage, the Blackwood family dynamics, the business connections between Dominic and my brother. The picture growing clearer with each conversation was of a house of cards built on shifting sand, ready to collapse with the right pressure applied at precisely the right point. I became Valentina's closest confidant, the one person who seemed to understand her without judgment. The irony was exquisite, like a vintage wine whose complexity revealed itself only to the most discerning palate. As I drove away from each meeting past the lake that had witnessed my rebirth, I sometimes allowed myself a moment of pure satisfaction. They had underestimated Esmeralda. They would rue the day they had awakened Zara. With each visit to the Ashcroft estate, I mapped the territory of their lives like a general planning an invasion. Valentina, believing she had found a kindred spirit in Zara Montero, grew increasingly comfortable sharing details that would prove invaluable to my plans. Our art consultations expanded to include lunch in her garden, walks along the lakeshore, and eventually, informal dinners when Dominic worked late, which was often. He and Thaddeus are inseparable these days, she confided one evening as we shared a bottle of wine on the terrace. Some new venture they refuse to discuss with me. Dominic says women have no head for the complexities of high finance. I arched an eyebrow, enjoying the freedom to show genuine reaction to such blatant sexism. How charmingly archaic, and yet, I notice it is your family money supporting his endeavors. Valentina sighed, looking out over the lake that had supposedly claimed my life. My trust fund has certain protections, but yes, Dominic has access to significant portions. My father arranged it that way, believing a husband should manage finances. These conversations provided public information, but I needed more. During a particularly long lunch, when Valentina excused herself to take a call from her interior designer, I slipped into Dominic's home office. Years of navigating art world acquisitions had taught me how to quickly locate and assess valuable information. His desk yielded little, but the laptop required no password, a carelessness born of arrogance. Emails between Dominic and Thaddeus revealed a web of concerning transactions, references to offshore accounts, and frantic discussions about capital requirements for something called Project Phoenix. More alarming were messages regarding pressure, from investors expecting returns that seemed increasingly unlikely to materialize. During subsequent visits, I performed similar reconnaissance, photographing documents with a miniature camera disguised as a lipstick, copying files to secure drives, and building a comprehensive picture of their financial situation. What emerged was troubling. Dominic and Thaddeus had constructed an elaborate investment scheme that resembled nothing so much as a house of cards. They had attracted millions from wealthy clients, including Valentina's family, promising revolutionary returns while using new investments to pay earlier investors, the classic structure of financial fraud. Most disturbing was evidence that Dominic had been systematically siphoning funds from Valentina's personal accounts into the scheme to cover mounting shortfalls. The man who had once dismissed me for my limited inheritance was now stealing from his wife to maintain his precarious financial position. My most significant discovery came during an afternoon when Valentina, suffering from a migraine, asked if I would mind continuing our review of auction catalogs alone while she rested. With the freedom to explore more thoroughly, I located a hidden wall safe behind a mediocre landscape in their bedroom. The combination, Valentina's birth date, such a predictable choice, revealed not just jewelry and cash, but a folder of legal documents. Among birth certificates and property deeds was an adoption record. The shock of seeing Valentina's name on this document momentarily shattered my careful composure. She was not born a Blackwood, but adopted at age 3. The names of her birth parents were redacted, but attached correspondence between my father and the family lawyer referenced arrangements to integrate V into the family narrative seamlessly and ensure discretion regarding circumstances of origin. Further documents revealed my father had established a separate trust for Valentina, distinct from family assets, with provisions that would terminate if certain conditions were ever made public. The pieces aligned with whispered family rumors I had dismissed as servants' gossip, suggesting my father had fathered a child with a family employee and arranged the adoption to conceal the indiscretion. This revelation added unexpected complexity to my understanding of Valentina. The cousin who betrayed me was potentially my half-sister, raised in our family under false pretenses, her entire identity built on the same kind of deception that had destroyed mine. For the first time since discovering Dominic's betrayal, I felt the uncomfortable twinge of empathy threatening my resolve. I photographed the documents and returned them exactly as I had found them, my mind racing with the implications. This information was a nuclear option in my arsenal of revenge, evidence that could not only destroy Valentina's understanding of herself, but potentially cut her off from financial support if made public according to the trust provisions. That evening over dinner, I watched Valentina with new eyes as she spoke of childhood memories, family traditions, her sense of belonging to the Blackwood legacy. The irony was breathtaking, her pride in a bloodline she did not actually share, her identification with a family narrative constructed specifically to conceal her true origins. Our friendship deepened as summer turned to fall. Valentina began including me in social events, introducing me to her circle as her dear friend from Europe. I met my parents at a charity gala, accepting their polite interest in my art business with perfect composure, even as my mother commented that something in my manner reminded her of someone, though she couldn't place who. At these gatherings, I observed Dominic's behavior with clinical detachment. He had developed a pattern of disappearing for portions of events, returning with subtle signs of hasty grooming. One evening, feigning interest in viewing a host's art collection, I followed him instead and discovered him in an upstairs bedroom with a young server, repeating the pattern of infidelity that had characterized his relationship with me. I documented everything, building a comprehensive dossier on both their public facade and private reality. The financial house of cards Dominic and Thaddeus had built was showing signs of imminent collapse. Investors were asking increasingly pointed questions, capital calls were being missed, and their emails grew more frantic in tone. The final piece of my intelligence gathering came during an unusually intimate conversation with Valentina in her garden. She seemed troubled, picking at the sleeve of her cashmere sweater, avoiding my eyes until I gently prompted her. "Zara, can I trust you with something I haven't told anyone yet?" she asked, voice uncharacteristically vulnerable. "Of course," I replied, the perfect picture of friendship and discretion. "I am pregnant," she said, the words falling between us like stones. 6 weeks now. I should be happy, I know. Dominic and I have been married 5 years. It is expected. But things between us are so strained lately. And with the anniversary gala coming up next month, the timing is complicated. The revelation struck me like a physical blow. A child complicated everything, introducing an innocent party into my carefully constructed revenge scenario. Dominic's child, yes, but also Valentina's, and by extension, possibly my own blood relation if my suspicions about her parentage were correct. "Have you told Dominic?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral. "Not yet. He has been so preoccupied with this business venture with Thaddeus. They are planning some major announcement at the anniversary gala. I thought perhaps I would share my news then as well, make it a double celebration." I nodded thoughtfully, mind already recalculating timelines and approaches. The anniversary gala she mentioned was to celebrate their 5th wedding anniversary, coinciding almost to the day with the 5th anniversary of my supposed death. They had planned an elaborate event at the Blackwood estate, with my brother set to announce their new business partnership to the assembled social and financial elite of the city. It would be the perfect stage for my revelation, but the pregnancy introduced moral complications I had not anticipated. For the first time, I questioned whether my revenge might harm someone truly innocent in this drama. "Whatever you decide, I am here for you," I told Valentina, the words feeling strangely genuine despite everything. These situations are never simple. As I drove away that afternoon, I confronted an uncomfortable truth. In getting close to Valentina, in understanding her vulnerabilities and secrets, I had inadvertently humanized someone I had intended to view solely as a target. The woman who had betrayed me was also a victim of my father's deception, potentially my own blood, and now carrying a child who had no part in any of this complexity. My conviction wavered, but only briefly. They had not hesitated to sacrifice me for their ambitions. The fact that I now saw the full, complicated humanity of my targets did not absolve them of what they had done, nor did it change my course. It merely meant I would proceed with greater precision, ensuring my revenge fell exactly where it belonged. The anniversary gala would proceed as planned, but my role in it had evolved in ways none of them could possibly anticipate. The anniversary gala preparations consumed the final weeks before my planned revelation. Valentina threw herself into event planning with almost manic energy, perhaps compensating for the strain in her marriage. She insisted I attend not just as a guest but as part of the hosting committee, a position that gave me additional access to the Blackwood estate where the celebration would be held. "You must help me with the art selections for the main hall," she insisted during our final consultation before the event. "Father has offered pieces from the family collection, but your eye is more discerning." The request was perfect for my purposes. It allowed me to spend hours at my childhood home, assessing the optimal staging for what would unfold. Under the guise of examining lighting and placement for artworks, I familiarized myself with the updated security systems, staff routines, and planned layout for the evening. More importantly, it gave me access to the estate's extensive storage, areas where family heirlooms were kept. It was in the climate-controlled art vault that I found the final piece of my plan, the Blackwood family portrait commissioned by my great-grandfather in 1932. The massive oil painting had hung in the main hall throughout my childhood before being replaced by more contemporary works after my grandmother's death. It featured 4 generations of Blackwoods posed formally against the backdrop of the estate, a visual testament to lineage and legacy. What made this particular painting valuable to me was not its artistic merit, but a family secret my grandmother had shared. The ornate frame contained a hidden compartment designed to store important family documents. During turbulent financial times, my great-grandfather had concealed property deeds and stock certificates within it, a practice continued by subsequent generations. I had my European art restorer examine the painting, ostensibly to assess its condition for potential display. When he found and carefully opened the compartment, it was empty except for dust and a few scraps of faded paper. The perfect vessel for my purposes. The day before the gala, I made my final preparations. I created a detailed package of documents, including copies of Valentina's adoption records, evidence of my father's affair that led to her birth, financial records showing Dominic's systematic theft from her accounts, and proof of the fraudulent investment scheme he and my brother had constructed. I sealed these in an archival sleeve and, during a moment alone in the vault, inserted them into the portrait's frame compartment. I arranged with the auction house I had been working with to provide last-minute services for the gala, specifically a surprise auction of a single item to benefit Valentina's preferred charity. The auctioneer, grateful for the business connections I had facilitated over previous months, agreed without question. The night of the gala arrived crisp and clear, the Blackwood estate illuminated against the autumn darkness. Guests arrived in waves, the city's elite dressed in their finest, kisses and champagne flowing freely. I wore black, a stark contrast to my usual colorful choices, a sleek column of midnight fabric with a single emerald at my throat, the stone chosen deliberately to match Esmeralda's eyes. My parents greeted me politely as Zara Montero, respected art dealer and Valentina's friend. My father complimented my business acumen, oblivious to the fact he was speaking to his supposedly dead daughter. My mother studied me with slightly narrowed eyes, that persistent sense she recognized something in me causing a momentary furrow in her brow before social training reasserted itself. Dominic moved through the crowd with practiced charm, stopping, occasionally to check his phone with poorly concealed anxiety. My investigators had informed me that several major investors had begun legal inquiries into the fund's management, the first tremors of the earthquake about to hit. Thaddeus appeared, equally tense beneath his social veneer, his laugh too loud, his gestures too expansive. Valentina was resplendent in silver, looking every inch the Blackwood heiress she believed herself to be. She had not yet shared her pregnancy news, her fitted gown revealing no hint of her condition. She performed the role of perfect hostess while shooting concerned glances at Dominic and my brother whenever they huddled in conversation. The evening progressed according to schedule. Dinner was served in the grand hall, guests seated beneath crystal chandeliers that had witnessed generations of Blackwood celebrations. My father gave a toast to the happy couple, his words about family loyalty and the Blackwood legacy landing with unintended irony given what I knew about Valentina's true parentage. After dessert came the planned announcement. Dominic stood, champagne glass in hand, to introduce Thaddeus and their new venture, described in glowing but frustratingly vague terms as a revolutionary approach to legacy wealth management. They invited interested investors to a private presentation the following week, promising returns that would redefine generational prosperity. As polite applause faded, I nodded to the auctioneer who rose smoothly to announce the surprise charity auction. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a special treat this evening. Through the generosity of Ms. Zara Montero, we have recovered a significant piece of Blackwood family history thought lost to European collectors. On cue, staff members wheeled in the covered portrait. Murmurs of curiosity spread through the audience as I stepped forward. During my research for tonight's celebration, I discovered this portrait had been separated from the family collection decades ago, I explained, the perfect blend of professional and personal in my tone. It seemed fitting to return it on this anniversary, a reminder of the legacy we all celebrate tonight. The cover was removed with theatrical flourish, revealing the imposing family portrait. Gasps of recognition came from older guests who remembered its prominence in the house. My father stood, visibly moved by this unexpected return of a family treasure. The bidding will begin at $50,000, the auctioneer announced, all proceeds to benefit the Children's Hospital Foundation. Paddles rose quickly, the combination of art value, family significance, and charitable purpose driving enthusiasm. As the bidding crossed $200,000, I raised my own paddle for the first time, entering the competition. My father, determined not to let the portrait leave family hands again, countered each bid. When the price reached $500,000, I stood. "If I may," I interrupted the auctioneer, "there is something special about this particular piece that bidders should know." With white-gloved hands, I approached the portrait and pressed the hidden mechanism my grandmother had shown me years before. The compartment in the frame clicked open, revealing the documents I had placed there. The frame contains a hidden compartment, traditional and important Blackwood heirlooms, I explained, extracting the archival sleeve. And it appears to hold some interesting family records. The room fell silent as I opened the sleeve and began to methodically display the contents on a velvet cloth placed on a nearby table. First came Valentina's adoption records, then correspondence between my father and his lawyer regarding arrangements to handle the situation discreetly after his affair with a household employee. "How extraordinary," I commented, my voice carrying in the stunned silence. "It seems there are aspects of the Blackwood family tree not widely known." Next came financial records showing Dominic's systematic withdrawal of funds from Valentina's accounts, followed by documents outlining the fraudulent structure of the investment scheme he and Thaddeus had created. I narrated each revelation, with the cool precision of a museum docent explaining historical artifacts. These suggest that the business venture announced tonight may warrant additional due diligence from potential investors, I noted, watching several guests check their phones with alarmed expressions, no doubt contacting financial advisors. My mother had gone deadly pale, my father frozen in place. Thaddeus attempted to intervene, stepping forward with forced laughter about private family matters and context, but security personnel hired specifically by me kept him at a distance from the documents. Dominic was already edging toward the exit when I revealed the final piece of my carefully orchestrated disclosure: banking records showing he had been embezzling corporate funds for personal use, including payments to multiple women in exchange for their discretion. Valentina stood immobile in the center of the room, her world visibly collapsing around her as each revelation landed like a physical blow. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely audible. "Is this true?" she asked, looking not at me but at Dominic, at my parents, at the life she had believed was hers. The chaos that erupted provided the perfect cover for my final act. As security contained the situation and guests either departed hurriedly or lingered in fascinated horror, I slipped into a side room where I had prepared for this moment. From a concealed case, I removed the tools that would reveal Esmeralda beneath Zara's carefully constructed facade. I removed colored contacts, revealing the distinctive green eyes of the Blackwood women. I peeled away subtle facial prosthetics that had altered my jawline. I wiped away makeup that had concealed the small scar on my temple from a childhood fall. With each removal, Esmeralda emerged from Zara's shell. When I returned to the main hall, the room had partially emptied. My parents huddled with their lawyer in one corner. Thaddeus was nowhere to be seen, likely having fled to attempt damage control. Dominic was being questioned by two men who appeared to be federal agents, summoned by guests with regulatory connections. Valentina sat alone on a gilded chair, staring at nothing, the perfect picture of devastation. I approached her slowly, allowing her to see me clearly for the first time. Her eyes widened, recognition dawning despite the years and changes. "It cannot be," she whispered. "Esmeralda?" "Death was kinder to me than you ever were," I replied, my natural voice replacing Zara's cultivated accent. "And unlike you, I know how to turn betrayal into opportunity." The next hours unfolded like scenes from a film I was both directing and watching. Security escorted Dominic from the estate, his protests fading as federal agents outlined the evidence of financial fraud already in their possession, my revelations merely confirming what they had suspected. My brother Thaddeus had indeed fled, but his escape would be temporary. By morning, his accounts would be frozen, his passport flagged, his carefully constructed image as a business prodigy shattered beyond repair. My parents retreated to the library, that fortress of mahogany and leather where family crises had always been managed with lawyers and checkbooks. This time, however, no amount of money could suppress what had been revealed. The Blackwood name that had meant everything to them was now tarnished in the most public way possible. Through it all, Valentina remained seated in that gilded chair, her silver gown pooled around her like mercury, watching me with an expression that shifted between shock, fear, and something more complex I could not immediately identify. "How?" she finally asked, her voice barely audible. I sat across from her, two women at the epicenter of destruction, surrounded by the debris of fallen illusions. "I never drowned. I discovered your betrayal with Dominic and chose to disappear rather than play the tragic abandoned bride." "The blood in the boat," she whispered. "The search parties." "Theater," I replied simply. "Like so much of Blackwood." "Family life?" A strange laugh escaped her, brittle and genuine. "You know about my adoption, about who I really am. Richard Blackwood's daughter, though not my mother's. The product of his affair with the housekeeper, adopted into the family to preserve appearances and keep you close where you could be controlled." She nodded slowly. "I only discovered it myself 3 years ago. Found documents in Father's study during a family gathering. He caught me reading them and explained everything, how it was best for everyone, how I was still a Blackwood where it mattered. This revelation surprised me. You knew you weren't really my cousin when you married. Dominic? Yes. Her gaze held mine steadily. I knew I wasn't your blood. It made the betrayal easier to justify somehow. Not that it was right. But I told myself we weren't really family, so it was less of a violation. The irony struck me forcefully. So my father's deception enabled yours. Generations of Blackwood lies, each building on the last. Outside the windows, I could see remaining guests departing in a steady stream. Society columnists already frantically typing on their phones. Tomorrow's scandal taking shape in real time. Within the room, staff moved discreetly around us, avoiding eye contact, removing evidence of the celebration that had transformed into catastrophe. Why come back? Valentina asked suddenly. You escaped. You built a new life. Why risk everything for revenge? The question deserved honesty. Because you all thought you could discard me without consequences. Because what was taken from me mattered. My dignity. My truth. My chance to write my own story. And now? Does it feel as satisfying as you imagined? I considered this carefully. The anticipation of this moment had sustained me through 5 years of careful planning, of constructing Zara while systematically dismantling any trace of Esmeralda. Yet the reality was more complicated than the fantasy had been. It feels necessary, I finally answered. Like lancing an infection that could never heal otherwise. Valentina's hand moved unconsciously to her abdomen, a protective gesture that reminded me of her pregnancy, the innocent life now caught in the maelstrom I had created. She saw my gaze and met it unflinchingly. Yes. I am carrying his child. Whatever Dominic has done, this baby deserves better than to inherit our wreckage. It was the word "our" that struck me. Her acknowledgement of shared responsibility, of mutual damage. For the first time, I saw Valentina clearly not as the villain in my story, but as a complex participant in a narrative neither of us had fully authored. What will you do now? I asked. Survive, she answered without hesitation. It is what we Blackwood women do, legitimate or not. And you? Will Zara Montero disappear as thoroughly as Esmeralda did? The question gave me pause. Zara had been created as a means to an end, a vehicle for my return and revenge. I had never considered her future beyond this night. I have not decided. Esmeralda cannot simply reclaim her life after 5 years presumed dead. There would be legal complications, questions I prefer not to answer. Then perhaps neither Esmeralda nor Zara, Valentina suggested. Perhaps someone new, someone who carries forward what you value from both. It was strangely the most honest conversation we had ever shared, there amid the ruins of the facade we had both maintained. A knock at the door interrupted our exchange. The family lawyer entered, his expression grim. Miss Blackwood, he addressed Valentina, your father requests your presence in the library immediately. There are matters that must be addressed before the morning papers. She rose with the composure that had been trained into her since childhood. Tell him I will join shortly. As the lawyer departed, she turned back to me. Will you be here? When I return? No, I stood as well. This house has nothing more for me. Valentina nodded, understanding the finality in my tone. Where can I reach you? There will be questions, practical matters to resolve. I wrote the name of my hotel on a discarded place card. I will be there for 3 more days. After that, I cannot say. She took the card, our fingers briefly touching in the exchange. 5 years ago, I made choices that destroyed your life. I cannot undo that damage. But perhaps in whatever comes next, we might find a better way forward. I offered no promises, but inclined my head slightly in acknowledgement before walking away. Outside, the night air was cool against my face, the grounds of the estate silent except for the distant sound of departing vehicles. I did not look back. at the house that had once been the center of my world. 6 months later, the Phoenix Foundation opened its doors in a renovated warehouse on the edge of the Arts District. Dedicated to recovering and authenticating stolen or misattributed artworks, the foundation quickly established a reputation for integrity and expertise. Its co-founders, Elizabeth Phoenix and Valentina Mercer, brought complementary skills to the venture, one with deep connections in European art markets, the other with an instinctive eye for authenticity. The tabloids occasionally recycled the Blackwood scandal, particularly after Thaddeus was sentenced to 12 years for financial fraud, and Dominic accepted a plea deal that included significant restitution to defrauded investors. My parents retreated to their summer home in France, their social prominence irreparably diminished. The Blackwood name, once synonymous with legacy and influence, became cautionary shorthand for hidden corruption. Valentina gave birth to a daughter, in the spring, naming her Grace, a choice that seemed both defiant and hopeful. She divorced Dominic while he awaited sentencing, reclaiming her mother's maiden name and establishing a separate identity from both her adoptive family and her disgraced husband. The truth of her parentage became public knowledge, but she navigated the revelation with dignity, neither denying her origins nor allowing them to define her future. As for me, Esmeralda Blackwood remained legally dead, her drowning a settled matter in public records. Zara Montero gradually faded from the art world, her international client list transferred to the foundation. Elizabeth Phoenix emerged instead, a specialist in art recovery with a mysterious background and a particular interest in family legacies. My grandmother's paintings now hang in the foundation's private gallery, accessible to selected visitors, but no longer hidden away. Among them is a small work I commissioned after the gala. 2 women standing at a crossroads, backs to the viewer, facing an unseen horizon. Between them grows a phoenix tree, its branches spreading protectively over both figures. Valentina understood the symbolism immediately when I presented it to her on the foundation's opening day. "From the same flame," she murmured, echoing words I had once spoken about our shared experience of destruction and rebirth. "But with different wings," I added, watching Grace sleep peacefully in her carrier nearby. There are days when the past reasserts itself, when I catch myself unconsciously tucking hair behind my ear, as Esmeralda once did, or speaking with Zara's cultivated accent. In those moments, I recognize that we are never fully separate from our former selves, regardless of how thoroughly we attempt to erase or reconstruct them. The revenge I so carefully orchestrated did not unfold exactly as I had imagined during those dark days after discovering Dominic's betrayal. The satisfaction was neither as pure nor as complete as I had anticipated. Instead, it yielded something more complex, a clearing away of lies that created space for an unexpected truth. That sometimes those who harm us are themselves acting from wounds we cannot see, and that the most satisfying revenge may not be in destruction, but in building, something that would have been impossible before the breaking. Valentina and I are not friends in the conventional sense. There is too much history, too much damage between us for simple friendship. But we are allies in a shared enterprise, 2 women who understand precisely how deception operates and are committed to exposing it wherever we find it. Her daughter calls me Aunt Liz, a designation that always gives me pause. A reminder of connections that persist despite our best efforts to sever or redefine them. The lake where Esmeralda supposedly drowned is visible from my new home, a modernist structure of glass and steel that bears no resemblance to the Blackwood estate. Sometimes I sit on my terrace in the evening, watching light play across the water, and think about the woman who took a boat out 5 years ago, blood on her dress, and determination in her heart. She died that night, in all the ways that mattered. What emerged from those waters was neither fully Esmeralda nor entirely Zara, but someone shaped by both experiences. Someone who understands that rebirth is not a single event, but a continuous process of choosing which parts of our past define us and which we leave behind. The Blackwood family portrait, centerpiece of my revelation, now hangs in the foundation's main hall, its hidden compartment permanently sealed shut. No more secrets, no more lies concealed behind gilded facades. The past is displayed openly, neither glorified nor denied, but acknowledged as the foundation upon which we build whatever comes next. In the end, I did not just reclaim my story. I rewrote it entirely, transforming betrayal into opportunity, destruction into creation. And in doing so, I discovered a truth more powerful than revenge: that sometimes the family we choose, complicated and imperfect as it may be, offers a more honest belonging than the one we are born into.